The curve arrived like a gasp. Wind hurled rain across the windshield. The guardrail flashed silver, then vanished into black. Emma gripped the wheel and let the road decide for a breathless second. The hem of Catherine's dress snarled around the handbrake like a white bramble. Headlights swelled in the rear view, too close, too certain, then broke across the glass as the car behind her followed the turn. She didn't know who was inside. She knew only the feeling, history gaining. A sign flared, half swallowed by fog, overlooked 300 feet. She downshifted, tires spitting water, and shot up the last incline toward the cliff. A small lot, a low stone wall, a sliver of ocean beyond, black and heaving. She cut the engine. Silence collapsed in, huge and immediate, except for the thunder's slow drum and the hiss of rain on stone. The other car rolled in and stopped across from her. Her phone, face down on the passenger seat, gave one last tremble before dying. Emma stepped out into the storm. The dress drank the rain, turned heavier. Lightning stitched the clouds and, for an instant, lit the other driver's face. James. He got out without slamming the door, sheltering his head with his hand as if courtesy could keep the rain off. He looked younger in the white-blue light, a boy who'd borrowed his father's rules and never thought to try his own. Emma. His voice was breathless, not from the drive but the distance between who she'd been yesterday and who she was now. Please. Get back in the car. We can talk somewhere dry. We can talk here, she said. He took a step, stopped at the dark seam where asphalt became slick stone. You can't just disappear. I didn't, she said. I left. His jaw worked. There's a difference. Yes. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to feel the rain cut through the last of her numbness. Disappearing is what I've been doing for months. He scrubbed a wet hand over his face. You're soaked. His voice softened on instinct. You'll get sick. I'm already sick, she said, almost laughing, not cruelly, just with the shocked clarity of naming it. Sick of being curated. Of being kept calm. Of being loved as a project. He flinched. That isn't fair. No, she said gently. It isn't. Thunder rolled over the water and down the cliffs like furniture being dragged across an upstairs room. Over it, Emma said, You read the letter. He didn't pretend not to understand. Yes. Why? She let the word hang. The old version of her would have patted it with apology. She didn't. He looked past her for a moment at the featureless sea, then back. Because I knew what it could do to you. To us. She held his gaze. To your story. He didn't deny it. She took a careful step closer, the dress sucking at her ankles. You also knew about the other letter. His brows pinched. What other? The one in your study. Lightning answered for him. He blinked, and in that glare she watched the truth break through his face, surprise, then comprehension, then something like dread. You were supposed to. He stopped, swallowed. How do you know about that? Someone warned me. She didn't say who. She didn't know who anymore. Ghosts had been texting her all week, dead and living, both in the same tone. He exhaled through his nose, a careful release. It's a copy. My grandfather kept everything. It's a letter Catherine wrote to him after she married Robert. And? The wind tugged at her hair, rain ran inside the bodice and made the lace stick cold to her ribs. What did it say? He glanced at the cars, as if laws of privacy still applied in a storm on a cliff, and then back at her. That he and her father offered Daniel a plane ticket and a stipend. That if he left quietly, he'd have a career waiting in Paris with friends of the family. Emma didn't move. A gull knifed through the wind somewhere below, invisible, louder than it should have been. And if he refused? James's voice thinned. Then they'd bury him. Quietly. No galleries, no commissions. Her father was on half their boards. My grandfather knew all the doors. So Daniel didn't leave for opportunity. He left because he was exiled. She tasted the word, iron and old smoke. He left, James said, retreating into precision, because they made staying impossible. Another wave smacked the cliff face. It sounded like applause that wanted to be a warning. Why didn't you tell me? she asked. He didn't answer, so she did. Because you didn't want your love story, our love story, to inherit their cowardice. His face closed, not cruel but careful. She knew that door. She'd lived in front of it for months, knocking with feeling and being met by reason. I didn't tell you, he said, because it's not us. It is if we pretend it isn't. She stepped to the low stone wall and set her palm on the wet granite, as if she were steadying herself on the spine of the earth. You keep promising I'll be happy once we're settled. That's exactly what they told Catherine. Settle. It sounds like safety. It's what a storm says when it wants you to go below deck and drown politely. Emma, he said, more urgent now, come on. We're not villains. We are two people who love each other and got lost near the finish line. I know you're not a villain, she said, and meant it. Robert wasn't either. He took that breath she recognized, the one that reset him into persuasion. You're scared. That's okay. I can hold the fear with you. We'll go to Boston, start slow. Therapy, if you want. We'll read the letters together and put them away together. We'll make our own name. The rain softened. In the lull, the ocean's pulse was naked. Emma listened to it and to herself. Say I go with you, she said. Say I walk down that aisle in an hour, and we read and we cry and we frame rules on the fridge. 6 months from now, when I say no to a tradition you love, when I want to keep my name, when I want to take a trip alone for my photography and you say, after we're settled, what happens then? He opened his mouth. Closed it. I won't say that. You already do. Silence. Not empty, loaded. The kind that drew maps. Who sent you the message? She asked. What message? If you walk away tomorrow, you'll regret it. She didn't tell him she'd recognized his cadence and then immediately doubted herself. The text had been clean, anonymous, not his usual punctuation. Was that you? No, his answer was swift. I called. I didn't text. He hesitated. I think my mother might have tried to reach you. She was beside herself last night. She found the ring box on the table. Something inside Emma cooled, clarified. She saw the strings, always silk, always hidden, and how many hands thought they were playing God when really they were just weaving a net. She shivered, not from cold now. From choice. Emma. James's voice softened. The storm retreated from it, as if to give him the floor. I am not my grandfather. I'm not your grandfather. I'm not Robert. I'm me. And I love you. Please don't punish us for letters written by dead men. I'm not, she said. I'm refusing to punish us with their silence. He stepped closer, not quite daring to reach for her. Then talk to me. Right now. Ask me for anything and I'll say yes. Anything? Yes. She let the challenge float between them. It glowed for a second, like a match cupped in two hands. Then she said, very simply, let me go. His face broke, not dramatically, not cruelly. Just honestly, a man watching a future he'd already furnished disappear room by room. Emma. You asked what anything was. She lifted the soaked skirt with trembling fingers. Water stitched itself down in a bright cold chain. It's this, I need to choose my life before I let it choose me. She thought he would argue. He didn't. The storm had taken that from him. Or maybe the letters had. He lowered his head and nodded once, the pivot of a hinge that had rusted around a story. When he looked up again, the fight in his eyes was gone. Not love. Not even hope. Just fight. I'll have your things packed. No. That's me deciding again. Tell me what you need. An hour, she said. And your promise. Of what? That you'll tell the truth when they ask why. He swallowed. Which truth? That I left because I wanted my life, she said. And because you loved me the way you knew how, but not the way I needed to be seen. The rain thinned to a misting ache. James nodded again. I can say that. Thank you, she said, and felt the absurd urge to touch his cheek, to bless a goodbye. She didn't. Some tenderness stayed true at a distance. He half laughed, the smallest wreck of a sound. Will I see you again? Yes, she said. But not today. A long breath stood between them. Wind combed the wet grass. Down below, the sea went on not caring, which was its mercy. He lifted a hand like a wave he couldn't quite complete, then turned back to his car and drove away slowly, taillights narrowing to 2 red commas, then a period, then nothing. Emma leaned into the stone and exhaled, a breath she felt in bones she hadn't named. It wasn't victory. It wasn't defeat. It was a door. By the time she pulled into Willow Hill's small lot, the storm had emptied itself. The world wore the sheen of having cried recently and not regretting it. She carried the dress in both hands, the skirt looped over her arm to keep it from dragging, the veil coiled like smoke. The nurse at the desk smiled with that kind sympathy reserved for brides and the bereaved. "Room 12, she said. "She's been watching the birds and refusing to nap." Margaret was awake, of course. She always was for the important parts. Her face warmed when she saw the dress. "You brought it back." "I'm not sure it was ever mine," Emma said. "I think I was holding it for you." Margaret patted the bed beside her. Emma sat, the lace puddling between them like a tide remembering all the shores it had touched. "Well?" Margaret said, the one word containing an era. "I went to the cliff," Emma said. "He followed. He told me about the letter in his study. Your mother's letter to his grandfather." Margaret's eyes didn't widen. She had the look of someone who has already grieved every possible version of a thing. "And?" "They bought Daniel a future elsewhere," Emma said. "They bought your mother a story that was easier to photograph." Margaret closed her eyes for a heartbeat. "Of course. I asked him for anything," Emma said, staring at the dress, not trusting her throat if she met Margaret's gaze. "He said yes." "And you asked to go?" Emma nodded. Margaret's hand, small, veined, strong, found hers. "How do you feel?" "Like a room after a party," Emma said. "Quiet. Messy. Full of air again." Margaret laughed softly, then let it fade. "It will hurt," she said, candid as rain. "They will say things, some will mean well, some won't. Your mother will be angrier than she knows how to name. James will go very still for a while. But it will hurt less than a life you didn't choose." Emma swallowed. "I know." She lifted the bodice, the little scalloped edge Catherine had loved, and smoothed it with her palm. "I found another note in the hem last night." "Oh?" Margaret's eyes brightened like absolution. "What did she say this time?" "That it's never too late to choose yourself." Margaret looked at the window as if Catherine were outside in the trees, listening. She would be relieved. She spent a long time believing it had been. Emma set the dress down gently. "What should we do with it?" "What do you want to do with it?" Margaret countered, smiling with the stubborn teacher's wisdom of returning a question. Emma thought about archives and altars, about museums and bonfires, about boxes and basements and all the in-betweens. "I don't want it to hurt anyone else." "Then let's turn it into something that can't," Margaret said. "They didn't burn it. That would have been too simple, and besides, it felt like punishing the wrong thing. Instead, they called the craft therapist down the hall and asked for her sharpest scissors. They cut it. Not in anger, in ceremony. Long, careful strips of lace. Gwen, the therapist with soft hands and a seamstress's reverence, showed them how to braid memory into something useful. Bookmarks for the letters, ribbons for the journals, a thin sash that could wrap a stack of pages like a benediction. They saved a palm-sized oval of bodice and stitched it to a simple muslin square, a small pillow for an empty ring, an altar to a choice. When they were done, the dress was many things instead of one heavy thing. The room felt lighter. So did Emma. "You kept the pearls," Margaret noticed. Emma touched her throat. "I'll return them to you, if you want." "Keep them," Margaret said. "Wear them when you write your first truth." Emma smiled. "I'm going to the coast for a while," she said, surprising herself with how right it sounded. "There's an artist residency. They take photographers on short notice if all you bring is a storm." "Good." Margaret's eyes shone. "And send me something when you see a sky she never got to." They sat with the braided lace between them like a treaty. Emma's phone, revived by a portable charger the nurse produced like a magician's coin, lit with messages she didn't read. A few she did. One from her mother. "Where are you? We're starting without the prelude." Then, 15 minutes later, "Emma?" Then, an hour later, "Come home." Then, "Please." She typed, "I love you. I can't marry him. I need time. I am safe." 3 bubbles arrived, then a blank, then "Call me." She didn't. Not yet. A message from James came too. "I told them the truth. Take what time you need. J." She stared at the dash before his initial and felt the precise measure of him in it. A man who would heal by polishing his story. A man she had loved. A man she could not marry. "Tell me something," Margaret said once the nurse left and the afternoon took its first deep breath. "When did you know?" Emma thought of the kitchen clock, the rooftop bar, the phrase "after we're settled," the way her laughter had sounded like cashmere stretched too far. "When he promised to fix what I needed to feel," she said. "And when the letter called that inheritance." Margaret nodded as if she'd been waiting for that particular sentence for years. "Good. Keep it. Write it down. It will try to forget itself." Emma returned the rental car at dusk and took a cab to the small apartment she'd found a sublet for near the train station. It smelled like eucalyptus and cinnamon. On the little table, she laid 3 things: Daniel's letter, Catherine's hem note, the braided strip of lace she'd tied with a knot you could untie with one honest pull. She slept for 3 hours and woke to rain. In the morning, she walked to the station with a duffel bag and a camera that had sat too long in its case. She bought a one-way ticket to the coast and, while she waited, called her mother. There were tears. There was the brittle snap of expectations trying to stand up in a wind they hadn't planned for. There was a long silence when Emma said, "I can't be the daughter who saves your photo album," and a longer one when she said, "I'm still yours, I'm just mine first." And then, slowly, her mother did what storms eventually do. She let go. "Come home when you're ready," she said, the smallest ribbon of grace in the fabric of a life that had not been taught to bend. "I'll make tea." At the gate, Emma texted James, "Thank you for telling the truth. Please be kind to yourself in the version of this where I'm not there." His reply was quick, then rewritten, then sent, "I wanted to build a good life. I didn't realize I'd decided it for both of us. I am sorry. Be brilliant." On the platform, a child pointed at the sky. The storm was leaving. The undersides of the clouds were lit with a color that didn't have a name because most people were indoors when it happened. Emma took her camera out and lifted it, not to capture, but to begin. A woman beside her, stranger, kind, glanced at the lace around Emma's wrist and said, "Pretty ribbon." "It used to be a dress," Emma said. The woman laughed softly. "Better as a ribbon then. Easier to breathe." The train arrived with the sigh of a door that had been stuck and suddenly found its slide. Emma boarded, found a window seat, and set Daniel's letter in her lap. She read it again, not to reopen the wound, but to trace the edges and learn the topography of what had shaped her. The last paragraph, the one she hadn't reached on the cliff, was the softest and the truest. "If you can, forgive the people who taught you silence. They were trying to survive the same story you are trying to end. And if you cannot forgive them yet, forgive yourself for that too." She folded the letter and tucked it into the journal Margaret had given her, under a page she'd already started. Day 1, the sound of choosing is quieter than I expected. It sounds like lace turning back into thread. It sounds like my own voice, unafraid of echo. The train shuddered and moved. Cities thinned to suburbs, to fields, to water. The world opened. Emma rested her hand on the oval of bodice stitched to muslin, the small altar she'd made for the ring she would not wear, and closed her eyes. She did not see the aisle she had refused. She saw a pier in an old photograph, wind tugging at a woman's hair, a horizon unlabeled, a painter saying, "It isn't too late." She smiled and said it aloud to no one and everyone. "It isn't." At Willow Hill, Margaret tied the last of the lace around a bundle of pages and pressed it into a wooden box. The nurse knocked and rolled in a tea cart. Outside, a grackle hopped across the sill and scolded the world for being late to its own morning. Margaret lifted her cup, eyes bright. She did it, she told the air, the past, the photograph on her nightstand. She chose. Somewhere in Boston, James stood in an empty venue and told the florist to take the lilies to the hospital instead. He sat in the back pew and read Catherine's letter to his grandfather for the last time, then sealed it in an envelope addressed to the Historical Society with a note, "For the archive." No more cupboards. He didn't feel absolved. He felt accurate. It was a start. Catherine, if she lived anywhere, lived where women put on dresses and then put them down. Where men read old apologies and wrote new ones. Where notes sewn into hems traveled without stamps and still arrived on time. The storm moved offshore. Sun later rode on the water and invited anyone with shoes and a heart to try it. Emma's train followed the coast. She watched the gulls play the wind and the fishing boats stitch slow arcs across the morning. The future did not come galloping, it simply sat beside her, ordinary and patient, like a fellow passenger with a suitcase and a book. At a small station, a young couple boarded and slid into the seats across the aisle. They were arguing in the soft, scared way of two people who haven't learned yet that love isn't proof by volume. The girl glanced at Emma's wrist and smiled shyly. "That ribbon." "It used to be a dress," Emma said again. The girl's smile sharpened, curious. "Did you make it?" Emma thought for a moment. "In a way." The conductor called the next stop. The sea flashed, then hid, then flashed again. Emma opened her journal to a new page and wrote a title without asking permission from anyone living or dead. "The Courage to Be Loud." She dated it. She began. And the ribbon on her wrist, made from a gown that once quieted a woman into a life, held steady as the train carried her toward her own. The letter was written 68 years ago, but it felt like it was meant for me. I stood in the bridal boutique, hands trembling as I read the faded cursive one more time. "My darling girl, if you're reading this on your wedding day, I've failed you. I'm about to walk down the aisle to marry a man I don't love, and I'm too much of a coward to stop it. Don't be like me. Don't let them choose your life. Run if you have to. I wish I had." In 2 weeks, I was supposed to marry James Montgomery III. And I was starting to think I'd made a terrible mistake.